Hey there. Okay, so this is She Be Willing 18 coming back at you, and we're going to do a part 2 of the initial video of who's the better school to train with for your CDL. Is it KLLM or Stevens Transport? So in the first video, we talked about the traditional nuances between schools, right? The maneuvers, the school facility, how you're paid, how you're not paid, what the requirements are for the number of hours over the road, what are the endorsement or the restricted endorsement on automatic versus manual transmission, and some other things. So now the classroom portion, once again, is going to be where you will take the 5 tests, and both schools have that, as a matter of fact. And they can test you there on site, and then if you successfully pass all the 5 tests, they'll take you over to the DMV, and that's where you will obtain your permit. Now, the key about the permit is it is a necessary evil to get out on the yard with. When you go out to the yard, you come to what then was an instructor like me, which is a yard instructor, that basically help you to fine tune and perfect the 3 maneuvers, the offset, the parallel parking, the straight back, right? So you're going through that for 3 weeks or so. And in between the classroom and the maneuvers, you're going to go out with what's called a driver instructor. Now, driver instructor is the individual who's going to take you and 2 or 3 of your fellow students, and they're going to take you out on the road. They typically take you to a not heavily populated area, somewhere like an industrial park, and they take you there so that you can get familiar with the truck that you'll be testing in, hopefully. Right? The truck you'll be testing in. So whether it's a Freightliner or a Kenworth or whatever it is, that way you can demonstrate to the driving instructor that you have a good command of the truck, its maneuverability. You'll recognize stop signs and other street signs that are important for safety. So they're going to have you do some very basic things. And in order to do those things, it requires you to have a lot of patience. It requires you to have the ability to accept criticism and to be able to listen and execute what the instructor is asking you to do. During all of this, you will need to be audible, so you cannot be shy, right? They will typically ask you to audio what you're doing. I'm pulling up to a stop sign. I am going to stop 25 feet behind the stop sign. I'm going to come to a complete stop. I'm going to look left, right, and left again, right? And then I'm going to proceed when safe to do so. So that's just hypothetically an example of what the instructor is looking for. They're looking to hear, not just that you can do it, but they want to hear you say what you are doing on every maneuver. That is a tricky thing for some adults. You will be surprised the number of adults who fail on that portion. They forget to tell the instructor what they're doing. They're going to want you to do that or you're not going to pass. And that's whether you go to KLLM or Stevens. So they're going to have you complete these maneuvers, left turns, right turns, what to do when you come up to a railroad crossing, what to say, and then you're going to swap seats. And you guys will do the same thing until the last student has completed that exercise. And then somewhere during those 3 weeks, as the instructor feels that the students are comfortable with the truck, they can handle the truck, they recognize a green light, a red light, a slow down light, and they recognize left turns, right turns, and all the signage that goes with driving a vehicle, they will take you on the freeway. And then they will allow you to get familiar with driving a tractor trailer on the freeway. And it is important for each student to be able to do that, right? Because no driving instructor during your 240 hours is going to want you in their truck if you overrule the fact that the stop sign said stop, or that you are not able to safely merge off the freeway or on the freeway. Those are safety mechanisms, and people just want to know that you are comfortable doing that, right? So regardless which school you go to, those are going to be some of the driving exercises that you will practice. So you'll have plenty of time at either school to practice prior to taking your official driving test with that type of instructor. There are yard instructors like I did. There's driving instructors which help you to practice, right? The actual driving, the handling of the truck. And then there's your tester, right? So that could be someone totally different. That's someone who is certified with the state to give you the CDL physical portion of that test. And so then within those 3 weeks, you're kind of going to toggle back and forth. You're going to be on the yard with someone like me that's going to help you perfect the offset, the parallel parking, and the straight back parking, right? Help you with your pre-trip, be able to call out the parts. Now, here's something real important between KLLM and Stevens. KLLM, when I went, if you had something close to the verbiage that they needed, they just really wanted to know that you knew that something had to be properly mounted and secured and what that something was. Stevens is a little stricter. Stevens has a script, and you are to stick to the script. You are to say verbatim what you are looking at. You want to point at what you're looking at, regardless what school, so they know. Don't point to a water pump and call it an air hose, right? So they just want a general idea that you know. They know you're not a mechanic, but they want you to be able to convince them that you know how to recognize when something's going wrong with the truck, right? Stevens is they're out there when it comes to the pre-trip. Verbatim, you're going to point to it and look at the instructor as you're calling out the parts, and that's the script. You're going to stick to that script. So a lot of students have problems with that. Me personally, as an instructor, I didn't appreciate it because we are not mechanics. And there are some things that you're not going to be able to say verbatim. And some of the things aren't relevant, right? You want to say they're properly mounted and secure. You want to say there's no abrasion, bubbles, or cuts. No abrasions, bumps, or cuts. Stevens wants you, if it says no abrasions, bumps, or cuts, don't stick bubble in there, because one instructor may fail you and the other instructor won't. Inconsistency. That's one of the things I heard from students about Stevens, right? It's too regimented, it's too strict, and one instructor says one thing, and then the other instructor says another thing. KLLM, a little looser. You can always get people. You can get one instructor say one thing, and then another instructor will say something else. I had to go through that. That's why I said have thick skin and be focused on what you came for, and don't leave without it. All right? So tying all of that together. So now you have had 3 weeks or more, depending on how fast you comprehend, doing the maneuvers, perfecting those, going out for half a day, because you're on the yard half a day, and then you go out half a day in the truck, learning to drive, right? That's at either school. So hopefully within those 3 weeks or so, you have mastered and you're comfortable with the maneuvers, the actual driving of the truck, and doing your pre-trip from the nose to the tail of the trailer. So you're doing the truck and the trailer, and hopefully you have it down where you're comfortable, right? Once again, Stevens way strict on the pre-trip. That was a problem for a lot of students. They had an issue with it. And I can't say I blame them. KLLM was a little more forgiving. Now that was in 2018. Things change. So you may want to just kind of ask them, is it the same before you sign the student contract? Also, another nuance is when I went to school in 2018, we trained in a traditional truck. It was a sleeper. You had a passenger seat, a driver's seat, and if you were not in the driver's seat, because the instructor is going to always be in the passenger seat, the driver trainer, you're on the bunk. Not belted down, because remember, it's a traditional bunk. It's a sleeper. The thing that I did like about Stevens is they retrofitted their training trucks so that instead of a bunk in the rear of the tractor, there were 3 basically passenger seats, and they all had seat belts. And I thought that was a cool selling tool, right? So that would be a difference in the type of truck. They're gonna all use either a Freightliner or a Kenworth, and it just depends. Now, what I liked about KLLM, if you trained in a Freightliner, you're going to take your test in a Freightliner. The problem I had with Stevens, you may train in a Freightliner, but then you may not. But when you go across the street, if you trained in a Kenworth and you go across the street to take your actual test, you might be taking it in a Freightliner. I can almost guarantee you 99.9% of the time is going to be a Freightliner. So tell me why I got to train in a Kenworth when there's nuances that's different from a Freightliner. So I had an issue with that, but here's something they did add in. They have a 4th box, and that's called a finishing box. So after you are cleared from the 3rd box, which is where I work, to say that you're good to go and that you should be ready to test, they send you to the 4th box, and that's a finishing box. In that box, you're going to train or perfect what you know in the type of truck that's going to be across the street for your driving test. Typically a Freightliner, always a Freightliner, as a matter of fact. Students had an issue with that because for 3 weeks they were training in Kenworth, and then now you want me in 24 to 48 hours to pick out the little differences in between the Kenworth under the hood and the Freightliner under the hood, and then throw me across the street and ask me to do the pre-trip verbatim. That's Stevens. So students were giving pretty harsh ratings because of that, right? At KLLM, when I went in 2018, a little more forgiving. You train in a Freightliner, you're gonna take your test in the Freightliner, and so all the pre-trip under the hood is the same, right? So you don't have to try to figure out that, oh, there's only the alternator on the passenger side, and then in a Kenworth, there's something else there. The alternator and the water pump. Whatever the nuance is, it was irritating to a lot of the students. It just took their focus away. So remember that. Other than that, like I said, have thick skin, stay focused, be compliant. If you're not somebody that can come back in time after time and sit down and recertify or listen to the same information regarding grad school, then you may want to consider your alternative of KLLM. If you're good with being trained in that way, and I am not saying that it's not a good thing, because more training is better than not enough training, then you want to pick Stevens. But those are basically the differences on its totality of is Stevens or KLM the better driver training school. The choice is yours, and it depends on your learning style and your tolerance level as to which school would be the best for you. This is She Be Willing 18. God bless.